Hello there, everybody, and welcome to my channel. We are here with our first ever installment of our Toronto Blue Jays franchise series. We are going to be playing a ton of games on this, and how we're going to do it is we're going to live stream all the games here on Twitch. We will usually play one game a day every single weekday from usually I think I'm going to start at 5 o'clock depending on if there's a Jays game or if there's a Sens or a Bruins game, because those are the teams I like to watch play. So based off that, we'll usually play at 5 o'clock each day. I will be doing a schedule release every single Sunday, I believe I'm going to do, so we can have an idea of what we're going to do. And what I like to do to play my franchise modes to make it go a little bit quicker is I'll play one full set of my starters, so I'll play 5 games, and then I'll quick manage the next 5, and then I'll play the next 5 after that, and then quick manage the next 5. Or if there's a special game that I want to play, like for instance our let's get to the calendar. For instance, our home opener would be on a game that we're gonna usually would be we would sim. Instead, we're going to go ahead and play that game and then sim the game that we would have played instead of the next part later, but that'll all make sense later on. Besides, that stuff that really more for me. So, welcome to our franchise mode. I'm just going to give a real quick rundown of the roster and how I like to operate in franchise before we get going, so you have an idea of how this is going to work on this series. So, the main goal is to have this be incredibly realistic and authentic. Okay, we want it to. I don't want to go out and trade for the Aaron Judges of the world or whatnot, or go get Garrett Cole, right? The only moves we're going to make are going to make logical sense, and it's going to make sense within the story that we create in this franchise world, right? So, for example, this happened a couple years ago. I'm still getting used to this whole thing. This happened a couple years ago to me, where the Brewers crapped out, and I traded for Christian Yelich, right? So, if that happens again, they're one of those teams that's kind of on the fringe, don't really know who they are yet. They could have a big year, they could not. I believe his contract's huge too, right? So if they all of a sudden just crap out, then we will, he'll become available, right? Let me just move camera display here. So he'll become available, right? Stuff like that. Now, I'm not saying we're going to go out and get Christian Yelich right away, but that's just kind of the idea of the things, right? And even then, we still have some rules that I'm going to implement to myself. Like, for example, I'm probably not going to make a trade for the first 2 months of the season unless it's to replace somebody unless we're just decimated by injuries and we need to get like a filler guy, we'll make a move. But I probably won't make a lot of moves in the first couple of months of the season, because in real life, there's just not a lot of trades at this time, right? You usually wait and see what you have, so we're going to do that as well. And another kind of couple of rules, like if I have to sign a starter, right, they got to build themselves up back in the minors, right? They got to go and they got to do their time and get ready before we can start them, stuff like that. Or if a starter gets hurt for one of those 1 to 5 days, we won't start him in his next start because he won't have enough time to properly prepare for the start. It's that kind of stuff that we will be doing, that I'll be talking about on the channel, whatever, that I want to do to try to make this as realistic as possible. And we'll go from there. So before we get started, I also like to edit the sliders and the rosters to suit my personal needs. These rosters might be a little biased. I am a huge Jays fan, but these are how I actually view the players and how I think they actually play to make the game more realistic. There might be some spicy takes in here when we go up there, but remember, I'm only playing against the computer. We're just trying to have some fun, but this is how I actually view the players as well. And just to break things down, this is also how I view the ratings and how it should be in MLB, and I would change it if I had the time to go through all the rest of the players, right? But for me, if you're from the 90s to the 100s, you're one of the top tier players in the league. You're the elite of the elite. You're doing things that nobody else can do, and that's where I got there. From 85 to about 90, that's where you're starting to get those great players that are really good, all-star players that are pushing the boundaries of elite, but they're just not quite there yet. From 80 to 85, you have about those really good MLB players that could be all-stars, They could just be really good starters, but they're good players if you're from 80 to 85. From 75 to 80, you're about an average player in my books, like an average MLB player. You're serviceable. You could start. You could be on the bench. You're right in that, like, you're an MLB guy. From 70 to 75, that's where you're kind of like, okay, you're on the fringe of MLB. You're kind of a good player. You could have some really good stats here and there. You could be a very useful bench bat, you know, that kind of thing. Like, you're on the edge. You're on the edge, maybe just right there as an MLB guy. And then from 70 to 65 or 65 to 70, you're kind of like that, just knocking on the door, not really MLB talent, maybe a good AAA guy. And then from there on, you shouldn't be playing in MLB at all. So keep that in mind when you look at my ratings. I'm going based off how I see the players. I'm taking into consideration most of the 2019, 2020. I go off of what I see. If it looks like it's something that's sustainable, like Teoscar Hernandez, for example, that was an entire shift in his approach that dates back to the second half of 2019. So I value his 2020 a lot more than some other guys who might have struggled or whatnot. So let's take a look at the depth chart. Starting off, we're going to go at our pitchers. You got Ryu at a 90. I have no complaints with this at all. This guy is a stud. I think he is criminally underrated across the league, although he's starting to finally get some respect. This guy, in my opinion, is a top 10 pitcher in the league. He is just incredible what he does with the ball. He's just one of my favorite pitchers to watch. I was so excited when the Jays got him. I love pitching with Ryu. We got Ross Stripling at a 78. To be honest, I don't know much about him. This was his rating from MLB The Show, so I kind of stuck with what they said. But even then, when you look at his past stats on the Dodgers, he has a lot of good numbers. He just never got a chance because that team was so stacked. So he could be a sneaky pick for the Jays this year, although he hasn't gotten off to a great start, but he had a little bit of tightness in his arm, so that might have been holding him up a bit. Steven Matz, he's had a great start with the Jays, so I bumped him up a little bit, but I'm still a little bit cautious about him. You know, Mets fans don't seem to be his biggest fan, but he's always be that guy that if he can just reach his potential, he could be deadly. He might be one of those guys that's a perfect change of scenery guys. Maybe Pete Walker can work with him. He's throwing his changeup a lot more to lefties. Maybe that helps. We'll see. Tanner Roark. I didn't even really want to touch him. I'm not a huge fan of Rourke. Pretty sure this is what he was rated when he came into the game. 73. I mean, we all like to make jokes about him, and I don't really want him on the Jays anymore, but he still is an MLB-ish arm. He's still serviceable. He's just not, I wouldn't put him in the rotation anymore. He's a 5 on most teams, but there's Rourke. T.J. Zoik. I think this is perfect for him. He's that nice little swingman kind of guy that just kind of fits in there nicely at that bottom, that number 5 spot where, you know, he can get outs, but he can get crushed if he's not on his game. And then we got our prospects here, Alex Manoah, Simon Richardson. And you'll notice that there's a couple people missing in Robbie Ray and Nate Pearson. We are trying to be as realistic as possible, so we are starting the season with the Jays injuries and opening day roster. So Robbie Ray, Nate Pearson, George Springer will not be in our first game, as you know they weren't there in the real life game. We're going to try to bring them back at the same time that they are in real life, but if we catch up, we'll just make ballpark estimations. Like, I don't think we'll see Pearson till at least May. He's got to build up right now. I think he's healthy, but he needs to stretch out to a starter. Robbie Ray, I don't know much about him either. I didn't change him too much. I believe this is close to what he was before. I bumped him up a bit because he can be really good when he is on, and he has looked pretty good in a Jays uniform. So I think 78 is a real nice spot for him. We have Nate Pearson. He was a 64, which is an absolute joke to me. So we gave him a nice, solid 75. You know, he didn't really get much of a chance to show himself, and when he did show himself early in the year, he was having problems with his arm, and I think that was messing up his velo. If you watched him last year, he just wasn't reaching the same levels he usually reaches, and his command was a little bit all over the place. But when he came back from injury, he was dealing. So we're going to leave him at a 75 with a high potential, and we're going to see what happens with Nate Pearson. Super excited to pitch with him. We got Thomas Hatch here. I love Thomas Hatch personally. I think he's just one of the really nice command guys. I think he has a chance to be a really good middle of the rotation guy. I thought he was really good last year. I love this kind of pitcher that controls his zone, throws strikes, doesn't have to get you out with a fastball. Anthony Kay, same kind of thing. He's got some good stuff, but he's a little wild. So I made him a nice 73. He might fit in and become part of the back end of the rotation near the end of the year. Alex Manoah, I did not touch. This is what MLB gave him. I may have upped his K/9 a little bit because he was just filthy against the Yankees in spring training. And you got some guys, Simon Woods Richardson, and some more prospects there that I added. So there's our starting pitching. We'll go to our relief pitching. If you're watching any Blue Jays baseball, you know Julian Merriweather has been a stud in any moment he's in with the Jays. He's just got a ridiculous fastball, a ridiculous curveball, a pretty nasty slider too. I personally want to see him in the starting rotation, but he's in the bullpen, and it looks like he'll be there all season. So we're going to keep him there in the bullpen for this season at least, and then we'll reassess when we come back next year. But he's just got a great fastball, and the majority of the time, he's got his command too while he plays. So when he's on, he is on. Ryan Barecki has really flourished in the reliever role. I love him personally. He was amazing last year. His fastball velocity keeps going up, and the strikeouts just keep going up as well. And he's always been a guy who has good command. I love Barecki. I think he's great in that bullpen as a lefty. Tim Meza has showed a lot of really good stuff. People are really talking highly of him, and he was showing really good before he got his Tommy John surgery before in 2019. So I think I left him at a nice 73. That's kind of around where they had him. I think he's good, so we don't know. We still have to wait and see with him. But he's got potential. David Phelps, I didn't touch too much either. Chatwood, I didn't touch too much. Dolis was a 54, which is just like absurd. I mean, Dolis has his command issues, but when he locates, his stuff is just straight nasty. It is phenomenal stuff. So we're going to leave him there at a nice 72. And he's got some good, he used to be a closer back in Japan, so we got him some good like clutch and things like that. AJ Cole, I've always thought, has been a very good replacement level reliever. He's always been good when he plays with the Jays. And when you look at his stats too, this is maybe a bit of a hidden gem here. He's always had pretty good numbers. So he'll probably be our first call up from the bullpen. You got Tommy Malone, I didn't touch. Trent Thornton, and then everybody else I basically didn't touch unless I needed them to be like Joel Pyaps, I think was like a 50 or whatever. So you bump them up to be a little bit reasonable. Closing pitchers, our boy Kirby Yates, that's all I like to call him, Yates. He has Tommy John, so we will not be using him at all. We might sign him at the end of the year, we'll see. But our closer is going to be Jordan Romano, who I made an 82, because if you've seen this guy pitch with his new style, like ever since 2020, with his fastball and slider, this guy is insane. He could honestly become one of the best closers in the game pretty shortly. I honestly believe that. When his stuff is on, he is untouchable. There was a little bit of time there where I legitimately thought he might not give up a run last year. Last year he was locating that fastball and slider like so well, and he's doing pretty well this year too. It's really just about command for him. If he can command that fastball and slider, you can't touch him. It's just impossible. And he's got that moxie, like I'm gonna beat you every single time he's up on the mound. I love me some Jordan Romano, and he's Canadian, so bonus points for that. Catcher, we've got our boy Jano. I think even with non-Blue Jays fans, people don't appreciate how good Danny Jansen is defensively. I used to be a catcher when I played, and I played as high as the provincials. This guy, he's excellent at framing. He's excellent at calling the game. He gets in front of balls. He's the kind of catcher pitchers want to throw to, and I think that has an incredible amount of value. And for the fact that he's not that great with his bat, he gets on base a lot. Like, look at that. Last year he hit 103 and he was still on base at a 313 rank. Like, that's higher than a lot of players on the team. Like, he honestly, if you just give me elite defense and an excellent on base percentage, that is fine by me as a catcher. And he was a hitter back in the minor leagues, so we'll see. But I'm really happy with him At 80, I think he's a solid defensive catcher. And then, of course, we've got the boy, though, who'll be our future catcher. Do not get me wrong. I love me some Alejandro Kirk. This dude just straight up rakes. This motherfucker comes in after only playing in single A ball and just torches the league last year. Look at that, 375. I mean, I know it's 9 games, but still, he hasn't played a single game above single A as a catcher, and this guy just comes in and just absolutely demolishes the ball. He's gotten off to a bit of a slow start, but I feel like he's really, really focusing on his defensive game, so that his hitting's kind of sliding a bit. There's so much that goes into catching that's kind of understandable. But we will have a nice platoon here with Kirk and Jansen, and our plan is to play Jansen 3 times out of every 5 games, and then Kirk twice. So in our little rotations with the starter, we'll play Kirk twice, Jansen 3 times, and I think my plan is to start Kirk with pitchers like Robbie Ray and maybe Nate Pearson, the guys that are more just throw in the heat, just beat guys with a fastball instead of being a finesse guys. The finesse guys I'll go with more with Jansen, because that's probably what the Jays would do in real life anyways. So we're going to leave it at that. Then, probably the spiciest of all my takes, I have Vladdy Guerrero Jr. as a 91 right now. If you watched him play this year, I think you will agree with me. He is just destroying the league. The weight loss with Vladdy is paying off, but more importantly, he just mentally looks completely different. He looks like a completely different player. Well, not really. He looks like the player he was in the minor leagues, and he looks like, to me, he finally realized that this is a job, this is his livelihood, and he needs to take this seriously in order to play out. So I think I am perfectly okay with what I have here at 91. I'm confident in saying I think that the way Vladdy's playing is going to keep up. Obviously, he's not going to hit 400 this whole year, but I'm fairly confident that he could put up, if he stays healthy, I'm fairly confident he can put up like a 320 average with 30 home runs, maybe 100 plus RBIs with an OPS above 900, maybe even close to 1,000, because he's also just taking pitches like crazy. Vladdy is on a whole other planet when it comes to being at the plate. Defensively, though, I mean, he still has an incredible arm. That's never been in doubt, but the fielding is still a little bit suspect. He's been very, very 50-50 so far this year. At first, he's looked a lot more comfortable, made a lot of good plays, but he's made a lot of still rookie mistakes, so he's going to be a defensive liability, but that bat plays right now, and we are going to represent that in the game. Rowdy Tellez, not much to say. Big power guy. Good defensively. I bumped that up a bit. I think he handles him. I think he's very underrated at first on that side of the thing. He was very good last year, but he's struggled mightily this year. He's chasing a lot again, so we just kind of kept the power up. The vision's a little bit better in the context, so we'll see. I think this is nice for Rowdy. And Marcus Semien, I don't think I changed him that much. I made him a bit better of a hitter because I thought they made him really weak for the fact that this guy was an MVP candidate in 2019. And really last year, the only downside was the fact that he had a really bad start in a really short year. Those last 45 games, he was actually playing better than his 2019 pace. So we're buying into a bit of that 2019 end of 2020, and even then I don't think I went that overboard with the hitting stats. He's always been, not always, he's been very good defensively so far for the Jays. He's very good in his last couple of years with Oakland. So I think this is very fair for him. And second base is also boosting up his overall quite a bit. We got Joe Panic, a couple guys over there. Biggio, we have at a nice 82. He's got some pop. He can hit against the lefties. We've seen that as Jays fans. The vision's a little low. Discipline's obviously through the roof. Defense is very good, although he's struggled a little bit at third base. The arm strength is a little bit weaker. I don't think it's that much there for him. So I like Biggio at 82. I think that's really good for him. My boy, Bo Bichette, probably my current favorite player on the Blue Jays. The flow, the swag, everything about him. This kid just rakes. And I also believe his defense does not get enough credit. This kid, his main issue on defense, in my opinion, is that he just tries too much sometimes. He tries to do too many things, and it gets him into trouble and gives him errors. Once he learns that a little bit that less is more, his athleticness skyrocket him. I think this guy's going to be a top 5, maybe even top 3 shortstop in a very short time. This kid just rakes, and we haven't even really seen that much of him yet. He's only played 75 games. The sky's the limit for this kid. 85, I think, is perfect for him. Teoscar Hernandez. This guy raked last year. I didn't really actually change him that much from what MLB had. I agreed a lot with what they said. He showed that he can hit for average last year. He has a completely different approach at the plate. He's not chasing as much anymore. He's letting players come to him, and he's going to the opposite field a lot more. So we're going to give him, I like what MLB did. They gave him a bit better plate vision and contact. I might have boosted those up a bit too. And last year he was a little bit better defensively, although there was a lot of struggles still. Apparently he struggles a lot in Rogers Center because of the lighting, so that's why he was known as a good defender when he got here from the Astros, but he still kind of struggled a bit last year. So his defense is still a little suspect, but the hitting, that bat plays. Lourdes Gurriel Jr., I didn't really change much here either, except for his arm, because, if you're a Jays fan, you know this guy can throw it. Oh my God. Search up some of Gurriel's throwing plays. It's insane. And the bat absolutely plays. This guy, honestly, I think might be the best hitter on the Jays, besides maybe Bo Bichette. I don't think we talk about him enough. He's always hit for a good average. Always had good OPS. He's crushed the ball too in the minors. Like, he doesn't have as much pop as you would expect, although MLB had his power left at like a 90, so I lowered that down a bit too. But yeah, I really love me some Gurriel. He's a little bit slow, and although he was a Gold Glove finalist, I don't think Gurriel's that great in the outfield. I think he makes a lot of really athletic plays because he is really athletic, but there's a lot of plays where he just gets bad jumps to the ball, and you just sometimes scratch your head with him. But he can make some incredible plays out there too, because he's just so naturally athletic. And remember, it's not actually his natural position either. So George Springer, we got him down in single A. He was rated 83 before. I think that is criminal. I think that is just buying way too much into last year. And even then, last year he had a really good year. I just didn't really agree with that at all. I bumped up his hitting stats a bit. This guy's just raked. I know there's a cheating scandal and all that, but this dude just straight up raked his entire career. And even last year, I think this was still a really good year. Really good year for him. So I don't really understand why he dropped so much. Defense still plays. I'm happy with George Springer at 87. Jonathan Davis, I bumped up a bit too. I love this kid. I think he's an excellent fourth outfielder. They didn't really have him having that great fielding, but if you've watched him play too, like, his fielding is just insane. This guy just runs down balls. You don't think he had any chance, and he just got all the effort in the world. He'll take everything he can. So we'll have Jonathan Davis as a nice 73. And lastly, we have Randall Grichuk, who is showing me a lot more. I was not a huge fan of him for a while. I thought the Jays made a huge mistake even signing him to that contract. I didn't think he was that much of a ball player, but ever since last year, since I think Dante Bichette started working with him, his approach I am just in love with now. He's starting to hit the ball the other way a lot more. He's letting the ball travel into the zone. He's finally not just trying to turn on the ball and kill it every time. He's becoming a 220 guy with tons of strikeouts. He's getting a lot higher averages. He played very well last year, very, very well. His defense is very okay in center field. It's very much more suited for right. He just doesn't have the speed to play center, but he's a good fielder. He always has been. So I think this is a very fair rating. He's got some serious pop. When he cranks the ball, he cranks it hard. And I gave him a bit of a boost to his vision instead of his contact, because he's starting to show it. He's starting to go the other way. And I even, I thought I changed it from extreme pulp, but we'll keep that for now. So there are our Toronto Blue Jays that we will be using for our franchise series. We might edit as we go with the season as I watch, if guys have certain ways, or we might edit based off how this series is going too. That will probably be on much later on in the series. But if a guy jumps out of nowhere and becomes a big player, we'll edit him up in the minors. But for the most part, I think the major league guys, we won't change too much unless the guy has a real big breakout season. But with that being said, let's give her and let's get